Hello, this is Todd. I've got a wonderful guest today. I'm going to let him introduce himself. First, I'm going to take care of some paperwork. We're recording this for news and media purposes. I'll be providing a link, unedited link, at the end of it. So hello, it's Todd. I got a great guest today. I'm going to let him introduce himself. It's a man that needs no introduction. Go ahead, sir.
Hey, Todd. Thank you. Mark Dutton, retired law enforcement officer of North Carolina Wildlife Resource Commission and candidate for North Carolina House District 78.
Man, that's great. Now, you're real modest when you start talking about that you're a retired officer, retired wildlife officer. Tell them what you did.
Well, I spent 30 years with the Wildlife Resource Commission. First 22 years, I was in the field as an officer and a supervisor. I was a sergeant for 13 years in the Piedmont area, Moore County, Richmond County, and Anson County. After that, I spent 5 years as the training director, overseeing all hiring and training for the basic academy and some other responsibilities with that, with some telecommunications and some other things, some credentialing and overseeing all the instructors, certifications, and that kind of thing, and service training. But then I promoted to major my last couple of years. I was working overall administrative operations, which the umbrella was pretty much still over the training and hiring side, as well as professional standards and internal affairs and policy, grant management, budget management. I was the voting law administrator, so I spent a lot of time working with federal government and state governments, state legislators working on voting law. So I spent a lot of time in the command staff over the last 7 years of my career.
So I'd say that you left your fingerprint on the agency, wouldn't you?
I'd hope so. I'd hope so.
I've been involved in hiring myself, and I got to leave my fingerprint. When I left, that I knew I was leaving competent people in place. So so tell us, you're running for state house. Tell us about your district.
Okay.
Go ahead.
District 78, which encompasses a large part of Moore County. If you're familiar with Moore County, it's Pinehurst area, west side of Moore County over in the Seven Lakes, West End. Then it expands north up into Robbins area, High Falls, and then into Randolph County. And it's pretty much the majority of Randolph County, other than Asheboro, Archdale, Trinity, that northwestern portion of Randolph County, and pretty much all the rural areas in Randolph County, excluding the east side with Liberty and Staley, or Sophia, I'm sorry. And so there's most of Richmond, or most of Randolph County, and most of Moore County.
So interesting thing about Moore County, you got Pinehurst there, and you got wide open area out there. You got two different worlds in that county. It's like being in literally it's like being in two different states at the same time. So people are going to ask, I don't ever care. You run as a Republican or Democrat?
Republican.
Republican?
Yes, sir.
All right.
It's a Republican primary, so it's pretty much decided in the primary.
Right. So you're running against, I had your opponent up here just a minute ago.
Neil Jackson.
Neil Jackson. I got it.
Yes,
just as you were saying, I said it. So you're running against Neil Jackson in the primary. So a lot of people get hung up that there's no Democrat challenger.
Not in a primary, so there'll be a Democrat challenger in the general. They don't have a primary challenger.
They don't have.
And I couldn't even tell you his name. I can't even tell you his name, to be honest with you.
I got you. It'll come up in November, right?
Yeah, that's right. Hopefully.
I hope you're running against him in November. So a lot of people get hung up on Democrat, Republican. I spent 30 years in government. You spent 30 years in government. It don't matter, does it?
No, there was no partisan in government.
It don't matter.
No, you served everybody.
That's right. It doesn't matter what the letter is behind your name. It matters what you do. So
Absolutely.
So what are your plans? What's your platform?
Well, several different things, and it really varies differently within the district actually, because the issues affecting Moore County and even within Moore County are different, and then the issues affecting Randolph County are different as well. So for Moore County, there's some concerns in some of the areas about some of the local control being taken away from local municipalities, decision making being made outside of local government that's affecting the community, primarily infrastructure, growth, and those types of things. So my concern is to keep local decisions local, allow our elected municipal and county government officials to be able to do their job and what they were elected for, to control the things and decisions making in their areas without government overreach or state overreach or that kind of thing. For me, I grew up here in Moore County. My family's here. Yeah, I've got a lot of roots and a lot of ties here. I went to public schools here. Public school system is very important to me. Um, Taking care of our teachers, taking care of our students. There's a growing epidemic for sure. Everybody's aware in our school systems with uh, synthetic substances and use of synthetic substances by teenagers these days, and in the forms of vaping and nicotine pouches and those types of things. And that's a big concern of mine, is to keeping our schools and our students safe. I still have one child in public school here in the area. So it's a big concern for me. So safe communities, protecting our quality of life, our infrastructure's taxed, our schools are overcrowded, our hospitals are overcrowded, our roads are overcrowded, our water is taxed. So we got to figure out a lot of things to be able to accept the growth that's coming here, because people want to come here. One of the challenges here is that it's a great place to live, and because of that, people want to come here. We have the military, influx as well, with Fort Bragg being close by and Camp McCall being close by. So there's a lot of things here, like you said before. There's a lot of things even in Moore County, that draw people. And Randolph County, has a little bit of different concerns. Their concerns up there is economic growth, jobs, utilizing that thoroughfare that they have coming through Randolph County to grow and expand the communities, but also being able to protect their heritage and their farmlands and their open lands and their cultures, and folks that still like to get out and hunt and fish and shoot and all the things that growing up in a rural county allows you to do. But on the same time, those folks want same thing. They want safe communities. They want safe schools. They want infrastructure. They have some issues up there with some of the sewage capacity and not allowing to be able to grow because of lack of sewage capacity. So there's some things there that need to be improved on. And also, it goes back to, government overreach. There's some state bills and things being pushed through to try to take away control, of those municipalities and those folks that need to be trying to make the decisions for the communities and the folks that they're representing. So that's most of a lot of the reasons why I'm sitting where I am.
That's what I was getting ready to ask you. Why in the world, after 30 years, did you decide you want to retire and go back into government?
Man, I'm gonna tell you, when you lose that identity and you take that uniform off for the last time, your sense of purpose, kind of starts to figure out like, hey, what's my purpose now? What's my mission now? Because I've always been structured. I've always been focused on a mission and purpose. And I just had to figure out what my next mission and purpose was, and did some studies and talked to some folks at the state level and the local level, and decided this was a good place for me to be able to put my footprint on and try to make a difference.
When I was working for Uncle Sam, we had a thing that said that you should decide what's going to happen at the lowest level possible. Top-down government really doesn't work that well. That's how we run government every day until we have an emergency.
Exactly.
I know you're probably FEMA certified, just like me. Probably certified that you could be an incident commander or a assistant commander. I am too.
Yes, sir.
Soon as we activate an emergency, what's the first thing we do? We flip that power structure upside down. The bottom says we need this, and the command staff in the emergency management center says, okay, we'll get it for you. That's the very first thing we do. And that's the way military ran missions. You had a 20-year-old corporal in the field that might be calling the shots, making decisions that affected this nation. So I'm a firm believer in local communities should decide what happens in local communities. And government shouldn't be governed by people that only walk on concrete, really shouldn't tell me what I'm going to do in rural Pitt County.
Absolutely.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
So I'm a firm believer in that, and I think you are too. There's some issues that I cover a lot in my writings. I got out of government and I decided I want to write books, so and write stories. So it's working out okay, but I've got friends that are actually in the House right now. People that I grew up with are actually sitting in the House. I got one that's running for the Senate, and you couldn't pay me to do their job. You couldn't pay me enough.
Yeah.
They don't get paid enough to do it. If you put 3 zeros behind it, it wouldn't be enough money. So I salute you for being willing to continue to serve, because this is not a job, this is service.
Absolutely.
I commend you for that. You and I had an online conversation recently about something that's happening up in Virginia.
Yes, sir.
And I'm not going to go into the whole system, the whole conversation there, but they're wanting to pass a bill that has a lot of unanswered questions. And it's passed its first reading, and it's going to go to full committee, and who knows what's going to happen. But your statement, I'll let you say it. As a law enforcement officer, you had some serious questions because there's a lot of stuff not addressed in that bill.
Yes, sir.
You said, and correct me if I misquote you, that how would you know how to write a ticket to? Who's got to have this permit, and who am I supposed to write a ticket to? You said something like that. I'll let you correct me.
Yeah, and I don't have it right in front of me either, but it's basically, it causes enforcement concerns for me just by looking at it on the surface. And, we did a lot of these things when I was in the office, and we sat down with legal, and we sat down with our administration and our executive committees and those types of folks to look at, and our legislative liaisons and all the people that are involved in lawmaking and bills. And, and you start looking at it from different perspectives of, what challenges you'll face, with each thing, whether it's an enforcement challenge or a social challenge or a finance challenge or, whatever. So for me, we ask a lot of those questions, and you try to get all your stakeholders involved, and you see, who's going to be in opposition of this, who's going to be in support of it. And you try to go to those parameters. And for me, you have to answer a lot of those questions before those bills get introduced. And if you put those out and you still have a lot of questions, then that means you didn't really answer, a lot of questions. And I'm not going to, badmouth Virginia at all. And I've got a lot of friends up there, in the enforcement side and in the legislative side. And, I'm sure there are probably a lot of reasons why they decided on what they decided on. But, I've seen those things happen over the years here. And, anytime you start taking away what folks' traditions and their heritages and their cultures and what they feel are their rights, you always have problems and challenges, and you have opposition. And, sometimes you gotta pick a hill it's worth dying on. And a lot of times there's decisions that we were making is like, is this a hill you're ready to die on? And a lot of times it was, no, we probably need to just to back up a little bit and look at it from different angles and, see how we can best, solve these issues or problems without legislating. And my whole thing is like, you can't legislate every situation. And I said this the other night in a speech when I was talking to a group that, one of the biggest problems we have with lawmakers is they never had to enforce the law, or most of them. There's some law enforcement officers in the House and Senate,
right?
But not many of them ever had to enforce laws. So when you're writing laws that have a lot of ambiguity in them, have a lot of gray area in them, and you take those down to the field level, and you have an officer trying to make a decision and use good discretion for his constituents, you don't want to put them in a bad place. So some of those things put people in a position where it's hard to make a decision. And if you don't have all those things, spelled out in black and white, and all the elements are there and everything's there where it's a fair an impartial decision, then, some folks can get put in a bad spot. And, from some of the things I saw in that bill, just on the surface, I could see where you could put some enforcement officers or some folks in bad position, or even the public, because, these laws are not easy to understand. And most people that are out, participating in regulated activities aren't lawyers, and they're not law enforcement officers. And they don't understand all, the insides of how things were, written, or how they were made, or the intent of the law to begin with. So it puts your constituents in a bad place sometimes too.
Right. So we'll go back to North Carolina. I had to touch on that because we had that conversation. I think it was last night. Sometimes things get away from me, and I get, so much stuff coming at once. So back to North Carolina, we had some recent rules recently. I'm going to talk to you about hunting, fishing, and trapping, off-roading, outdoor stuff, because it's what we do.
Sure. Yes, sir.
We had some changes recently to fishing, and I understand that's marine fisheries. That's not wildlife resource, but
yes, sir.
They changed the manner of take and the amount of take and everything on a bunch of fish that people really enjoy catching.
Yes, sir.
Anything to say about that?
I was involved in several of those conversations over the last few years with our commission and Marine Fisheries Commission, and it's no secret there was a lot of public headbutting going on between the two commissions and our fisheries and their fisheries and rulemaking and that kind of thing, and a lot of that was over authority and the delineation of waters, and who had the authority over hook and line, who had the authority over, other manners of take and that kind of thing. And, we stood our ground, and, we want to try to do what's best for the sporting public. At the same time being fair with the resource and protecting the resource, and also, paying attention to our research and our studies from the biologists and the fisheries folks that are a lot smarter than, sometimes than we are, with telling us, hey, the trends and their plans and that kind of thing. And I think a lot of times, science kind of gets overlooked for other reasons, maybe political reasons and maybe some pressures and that kind of thing. But we always try to, follow the science and go with what, science tells us. And, sometimes that's to the detriment of the public, and sometimes it's to the advantage of the public. And, anytime you tell somebody they can't do something, people are going to be upset. And, as long as you have a good reason, and you have the why, and you explain the why, and you understand, and hopefully, folks can understand that, it was done for good purpose and good reasoning, and eventually it's going to pay off. I kind of equate it back when I was a kid, and I didn't really like my mama spanking me very much, but, years later, I understood why she did it, and I was better off for it.
I get that, man.
Yeah. So there's some of those things.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say there's some of those things, with that, and hey, Marine Fisheries Commissions, they got a tough job. They got to make commercial fishing folks happy. They got to make recreational fishing folks happy, and they also have to protect the resource. And I like fishing too. I like catch a flounder. I like catch a trout, and I like to eat them when I catch them.
No doubt.
But there's a lot of times I go down the coast and I catch a lot of fish I can't keep, and and hey, I respect that and I understand it, and and I go back to what my career was and how I had to be fair to people and be fair to the resource and everything else. So sometimes we don't understand a lot of the reasons behind that, but hopefully it can be communicated to people where they can understand.
Right. I grew up hunting, fishing, trapping a little bit, riding dirt bikes. I grew up in a swamp where it was wide open woods, and the man that owned it, as long as I respected his trees, he didn't care. If he had a ditch he needed cleaned out or whatever, when I was about 12, 13 years old, he talked to me about it. And next thing you knew, all the trash and everything was out of the ditch. It was cleaned up. I respected his land. He let me do about like I please on it. And I hadn't forgot that.
Yeah.
That man has passed on now. But that was the way I grew up. I grew up with land stewardship. And my family
Yeah.
is from Onslow County, and they own quite a bit of land, farmland, woodland. We hunt down there, and we hunt about 10,000 acres. We own some of it. Some of it we lease from a timber company, and some of it we only still hunt, and what we still hunt we own. So that's not included in that 10,000 acres I was talking about. But there's a lot of land down there my family controls, and we try and do things right. Your guys came out the day after Christmas one day, and I'm gonna call it raided us. There was a sergeant there, and there was 6 officers, and they came rolling into our property. And warden named Barbara. That's all I'm identifying her as, a first name Barbara. Barbara and I had a nice little chat at my truck window, very polite chat. And my cousin, Ronnie, was sitting in my passenger seat, and we talked, and she said, so she was looking at my hunting license. She said, "You're a guide?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I am." And I said, "But can you tell me what's going on? I ain't never seen this many game wardens in one place in my life." She said, excuse me, my nose itches. She said the landowner called and said you guys were running dogs all over and weren't trying to hunt. I said, "What landowner?" She said, "I don't know." I said, "Well, you see that red truck sitting in front of me?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Walk right up there and talk to that man. That is the landowner. We're on his land. That's the landowner right there. Go talk to him." So it turns out that somebody called about us that lived out on a 100 by 200 lot next to the highway.
Mhm.
And we hadn't been up on their property. We hadn't had any dogs up on their property or anything. We've been on ours the whole time.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, the area is surrounded by farmland, and most of that farmland's ours. So there's a buffer. You know, there are some places there we don't own, and we do our best to stay away from them. But we got a big chunk of land that we control and own. But the complaint came from someone that didn't have any skin in the game and flat out told a lie. Actually, they didn't tell a lie. When it was investigated a little bit further, they had cut them a lane back into our property and were sitting back in the woods on our property trying to hunt.
Imagine that.
Yeah. Now, the thing is, we're a little different than other folks. We didn't go try and indict them or anything. We went around, talked to them, said, "Hey, man, you got a deer this year?" He said, "No." I said, "You want some deer?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Man, the boys killed 3 today. You want some ham? You want some, what do you want? Backstrap? What you need?" And hooked him up with some deer meat. We changed phone numbers, and he's got a schedule now. He knows when we're going to hunt.
Yeah.
And he knows we don't care if he gets in his deer stand and takes that deer. We don't care. We could care less.
Yeah.
So
Good relationships. That's what it's all about.
he thought we were going to be enemies, and now we're friends. So having good relationship with your neighbors. I personally think that most arguments could be settled over dinner. You know what? Might even not have to have dinner. Might just settle it over pie. You know, sit down, eat a piece of pie, and talk about it. I've never understood why we have to have so many arguments about things. I guess people are very opinionated and they really want to talk. Which that leads me into hunting. We talked about fishing a little bit. Gonna lead me into hunting a little bit. Got a bunch of people that say you shouldn't be able to take a buck deer that's less than such and such size and so many points and so on and so forth. You were in charge of training. Tell me about it.
Well, the training side of it basically was our basic school. So, you know, we hired our new recruits and we sent them through a 7 months school with basic law enforcement training to begin with for the first 23 weeks. And then letting the rest of the course, 13, 14 weeks, whatever it was specialized, you know, mostly wildlife conservation, law enforcement, boating, fishing laws, game law, you know, all the things that you got to learn to be, you know, a wildlife officer. You know, then we put them in 6 months of field training with a seasoned veteran training officer. So they get about a year of training before they're turned loose somewhere. And then once they're turned loose, they're still supervised with an area supervisor, and they have seasoned veteran officers around them to help guide them and everything. But a lot of it is on the job training, especially for young folks and people that have only been in for a short period of time or never were in law enforcement before, and that kind of thing. So you can try to teach and train and help folks, but a lot of that comes from life experiences, like you said. I mean, I grew up same way. I grew up, I could leave my grandma's house with a pair of bird dogs and a shotgun and walk across about 20 different landowners' land, bird hunting for 5-6 hours at a time. And everybody knew me and everybody knew my grandma and my grandpa, and, there was no problems and that kind of thing. So, that valuable experience that you learn from a small age, you can't really teach. You can't teach folks about woodsmanship and sportsmen and outdoor stuff and sign and all those things. It's very hard to train people and teach people those types of things. When you talk about a deer and size and all that, I know there's some states, probably Midwest, up Iowa and places that have size limits, and of course they have totally different deer hunting than we have here. But it goes back to what are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to regulate? Are you trying to regulate the population? Are you trying to regulate quality deer management? What's the goal? I've heard a lot of things thrown out about, hey, we need this, we need that, we need this, we need that. And when you start, pulling the layers off of it, it gets back to, okay, is it science-based? Is it social-based? Is it fiscal-based? Or, what is it? What are we trying to accomplish? And then you have to start figuring out, okay, what rules or laws would help do that, and without punishing people or without making it, an unenforceable rule or unenforceable law, putting people in a bad situation. So it goes back to some of that, and I'm not sure exactly which regulation you're talking about, but you can expand on that a little bit.
All right, I'm going to, but I had to lead in with that. And you mentioned hunting out west. I'm gonna jump into that real quick. I got a chance to go out to Idaho in 2019 with 7 dogs. I had five grown dogs and 2 puppies, me and my son. With a special commission from the governor of Idaho, we went out and hunted elk with dogs with the game warden. Now, you ain't hunted until you've hunted with the game warden. But we went out. I actually had the head of the Department of Natural Resources out on several hunts with me. He and my son, I've got a picture of him standing on top of a side-by-side, standing literally up on top of it, looking into a cornfield, watching the dogs run the elk. And by the way, when an elk's being run by dogs, it sounds like a horse. It literally sounds like a horse coming through the cornfield. But anyway, we got a chance to do that. We're the only 2 houndsmen in the 21st century that have done it legally, me and my son. So we got to go out there and do that. And you're talking about they got different styles of hunting. They have a lottery. You got to draw a big game tag. You might not get one. We were basically trying to get some elk off some problem areas where they were in ranchers' fields and stuff. My son was with the head of the Department of Natural Resources, and he said, now you can shoot elk, or if there's a big deer comes out, you can shoot a big deer. Look, we're from Tick Bight, North Carolina. We grew up in the swamp. The deer around here look like dogs. They're little, okay? They called it a 3x3. It's a 6-pointer. A big mule deer 6-pointer busted out on my son. He threw his rifle up and started getting on that deer. My boy can shoot. He can hit one running. And he had his rifle up. He flipped the safety off, and the guy with the head guy from DNR reached over and pushed his rifle down. So don't shoot that one, son. That's a baby. My son was like, that's the biggest deer I've ever seen, man. My God, you told me to shoot the big ones. I ain't never seen one that big before. So there's a big difference in culture. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you've never been close to a moose or an elk, you really don't have a respect for how big those animals are. And I'll spoil the punchline a little bit. Our goal was to try and run the elk out of the cornfields and get them back up in the desert and lead them to stay there.
Yeah.
We ran one out. We had 4 grown dogs and 1 puppy on him, and we ran him several miles out into the desert. My son and the ranch owner's grandson were following on a side by side. And this one had a GPS collar on it, so we weren't going to shoot this one. We wanted to observe its habits. I've got the GPS tracks on this elk, by the way. It's kind of neat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The dogs ran it about 3 miles out into the desert. It ran up the side of a mountain. It made a hard right bank. It ran about 600 yards. It made another hard ride bank and ran straight back into the cornfield we just run him out of. Every elk that we ran out of those fields that had GPS collars on them, we ran them out with dogs. And the next day, they were back in the field.
And then when the food was.
Sometimes it was within a couple of hours they were back in the field. If we didn't put them on the back of a truck, they were back in that field. And by the way, if you put an elk on the back of a truck, you put him on the back of a rollback with a winch.
Yeah, I say it better be a big one. Unless
you cut him up on the ground, you use a winch. I learned a lot while I was out there. But I'm glad I participated. I wish I could do it again. There was a big public health scare that messed up my study, and I had to come home. And you know the time frame I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
So, but where I was going with that was some people want to manage. Well, let me back up. I told you, we're hunting 10,000 acres, and we've got.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually probably more like 20, but there's 10 that's contiguous. It's together. I see conflicts all the time. People contact me all the time. I've got this conflict. I've got that conflict. My answer is always the same. Put up some cameras. Let's get some evidence. If they're breaking the law, let's catch them on camera breaking the law. Let's call law enforcement. Let's get them prosecuted. I don't care which side of it it's on, whether they're running a dog or whether they're not running a dog. I don't care.
Yeah.
If you're a criminal, let's prosecute you. But the conflicts that I see and that I've been seeing over 10 years is there's a large property involved, and then there's a small property involved. And it might be the small property is trying to still hunt it and try and manage his deer on 30 acres. Deer don't stay on 30 acres, you know that.
Yeah.
Or it could be the other way around. I've seen instances where guys have got 2 acres over here, and I saw one instance where it was 2 acres and it was a complete empty field for 2 acres.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side of this block, they had 5 or 6 acres. And the whole block's about 600 acres. So in 600 acres, they had maybe 10 or less. They had 10 or less total.
Mm-hmm.
And at least 3 of it was nothing but an empty field. And they were turning dogs loose in the 3-acre field and hunting the whole block.
Yep.
Now I'm going to have some supporters that want to hang me. That ain't right. It ain't. That's what causes the conflict. Why do you want to seek out conflict? If you want to hunt that area, that 500 acres, go talk to the other people. Go talk to them. If they say no, it's no. That's the answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you may be able to work something out with them. My neck itches now. Maybe it'll work something out with them. For example, I told you about our property. We do Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, ain't nothing going on. We got it divided in half. So it might be Tuesday on this side and Thursday on that side. So at any given time, those few people that are around us that aren't with us, they might not hear us involved in a hunt for 2 weeks because we're not there. But that's our solution. It's not everybody's solution. And I don't think I should force my solution on somebody else. There might be somebody that's hunting that 6 acres with their beagles rabbit hunting that's perfectly fine. Who knows? Somebody might be able to keep a walker on 6 acres. I can't, but maybe they can. So there's not a one size fits all. That's where I was going with do you think local communities should solve it? And I know that's a flame point. And like I said, my own supporters will some of them will want to hang me because I said it. But for 10 years, I've been quoted as saying, if every time when you turn your dog out, if it gets out of bounds occasionally, and by occasionally I mean once or twice, that's a mistake. You should talk to your neighbor. If your neighbor's got a problem with it, y'all need to work it out. If every time you cut your dog loose, he's on your neighbor's property, your neighbor don't want him over there, that's a problem. It's what we call a habit.
Yeah.
It's what we call intentional. I believe there's a law enforcement term for it. Willfully.
Yeah. And intentionally.
Willfully and intentionally. That's right. I mean, that's what it is. So, I mean, if every time you cut him loose, he's over at your neighbor's house, you shouldn't be able to get away with that. So, here's your only hard question. It's not a gotcha question, but it's your only hard question. Where do you stand?
On what? Just specifically?
On hunting with dogs.
Oh, well, hunting with dogs is the legal method of hunting. So, I stand with legal methods of manner of take, and that's, it's not up to me to decide whether or not,
you're about to be a representative. It is up to you.
Well, the law enforcement officer it was not up to me. It was, hey, this is a legal matter, and it's one you gotta support. For me, I've seen 30 years of that conflict, going back to down east when I worked down east, and you had the large tracts of 5, 6, 10,000 acres of land where, that's where hound hunting and dog hunting originated, and that's where it's, the traditions and the histories and the cultures are, and landowners down there, they don't bother anybody because, like you said, if you own 10,000 acres of land, you're going to very seldom bother somebody. And I've seen it, up into this part of the state where the Piedmont, where you do have the 5, 10, 20 acre tracts, or you got state land butting up against private land, and state land seasons and days are open days are different than private land open day. I mean, it's just, you name it, all those types of things. For me, I told you I cut my teeth, dog hunting. I started just right down the road here when I was 13 years old, and we had about 1,500 acres, and it was a good size, piece of land for this type of area. But there was a lot of land and clubs that bordered ours, so we were hunting our land, they were hunting their land, and our dogs sometimes get off on theirs, and vice versa. And we'd throw a blanket out or a jacket out or whatever, and didn't have GPS collars back then. So, dogs come back to a scent, that kind of thing. And somebody pick your dog up and call you, say, hey, I got your dog down the street, whatever. We never had any problems. And, we did it the old tradition way. We, got in, put standards out. We had dog men, they walked in the woods. And once they left the truck, they never went back to the truck, so the ways of hunting back then were a little different now. There's still some places that do those types of things, but a lot of the hunting now has gone to GPS collars and trucks and trying to manage your dogs and stuff inside your blocks of land and to keep, and a lot of that's for you guys is to keep your dogs safe, for one, and also protect your neighbor's land, because you don't want your dogs getting over it. I mean, most dog hunters I know, owners, especially when I say dog hunters, I'm saying dog owners and dog men, they don't want their dogs on other people's property. That's the last thing they want. They want to keep them on theirs, and they want to produce a good hunt on their own property. So when the dog gets off, it's not benefiting their own hunt. So there's not a lot of intent there. I'm going to support legal methods and manners of hunting. I've seen how in the past, even here in this county, probably 20 years ago, one of the local legislators threatened that he was going to do away with dog hunting. And you know what happens when that happens? They about had to, he's since passed away, but they about had to escort him, out of the courthouse when they had a public hearing, because there was about 500 folks up there that didn't really like what he had to say. And, so anytime you start threatening people's rights and, their culture and their history and tradition, you're going to have opposition. And I understand that. I've seen it. You can't legislate everything. So there's things that you do, parameters that you do to try to put in place to keep everybody happy, which you're not ever going to do. But you do the best you can without eliminating folks' rights, and the things that they enjoy. And for us, I mean, my agency is in the business, or I'm retired now, but my agency was in the business of promoting safe, ethical, legal, conservation and hunting. And, that's what the purpose was, and it wasn't to restrict people from doing the things they enjoy. And, obviously you got to have rules and parameters, but it was to promote it. And that's what it's all about. And North Carolina, hunting in North Carolina is a big industry. I've seen the studies and run the numbers and, the economic impact and those types of things. And that's what drives lawmaking in North Carolina, is the economic impact that it has: fishing, hunting, outdoor recreation, shooting sports, all the things that we have. There's a lot of tax dollars that get, spent. There's a lot of funds that come for those programs. So you have to pay attention to that as well, especially with lawmaking. And, I think, like I said before, General Assembly's job sometimes gets difficult because those folks never had enforced the law. And so when you start looking at things, you start taking information from the people that are educated, and go back to the science base. You go back and you talk to your constituents, and you talk to stakeholders, and you figure out, why are we trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish to begin with? And then how can we best accomplish that without, destroying something that people have enjoyed and done their whole life? So, I mean, short of it is, I support all legal manners of hunting, and dog hunting is one of those.
Me too. And that's something a lot of folks don't understand. A lot of these guys got dog box on the back of their truck. They got a bow in the closet. They use it. They got a muzzle loader. They got a climbing deer stand. They do it all. Them boys I hunt with, my family, every afternoon when they get done working on the farm or during hunting season, you know what they're doing? Climbing a tree. They do the exact same thing.
And they're spending money, they're buying ammunition, they're buying guns, and they're putting money toward the excise taxes and things that, Pitt and Robertson and Dingle Johnson, and all that money that comes back to us. So you got to realize that those people are spending money, and they're doing land management, they're doing food plots, and they're, doing controlled thinning and burning and all the things that are, good land management. And a lot of folks do quality deer management, or try to, as best they can. Yeah. And I was going to say, from you and I grew up hunting, it's a complete 180 from what it used to be. We dog hunted, and you couldn't kill a doe. You had 2 doe days of deer a year.
That's right.
And you got 1 doe, and but you could kill 4 bucks. And so, when you saw a spike buck, or you saw a little, fork and horn or whatever, you shot it, because you might not ever see another. And occasionally you see a nice 6-8 pointer. So we thought 35, 40 years ago that was deer management. And we've learned, because of what science tells us and what the biologists and the studies and things that have told us, that wasn't the way to manage a deer herd. And now it's completely opposite. And now we're managing deer herds by shooting does and culling bucks, and trying to limit the amount of bucks that people take and that kind of thing. So it's a big difference, and that's where you learn things based on history and data, and what supports those decision makings. So I don't know what history and data they were going off of 40 years ago, but it was probably that there wasn't many deer back then.
Well, I do know that when I was a boy, that my daddy, my uncles, and their friends might ride around in the truck half a day looking for a deer track, just looking for a deer track.
Oh yeah.
And then they'd find one that looked like it was about that big, and they'd say, "Well, we probably won't be able to kill this one, but at least we'll run it with the dogs, and it might run something else to us." And I got a picture on the page somewhere of me about 5 years old holding a rack buck and cheesing it up for the camera. First deer I ever killed was a rack buck. Killed it with a 410 shotgun sitting in my daddy's lap. And there's a picture of me, like I said, cheesing it up for the camera. So I got one more question for you. Sure. And then I'm gonna tell you a story, and then I'll let you go if you want to go.
Okay.
Next question is, I think you've already answered it for me. Where you stand on the Second Amendment?
Oh, absolutely, 100% in support, defend the Second Amendment. No hesitation at all.
Right. All right. Now I'm gonna tell you a little story. Daddy fox hunted. Did a lot of fox hunting. He was friends with the county sheriff too, but did a lot of fox hunting. One night, knock came at the front door. Little me, I was about 10. I went running to the door and opened the door, and there stood a man with a badge as big as a wheel cover on the front porch. He was the county sheriff. He said, "Your dad home?" I said, "Yes, sir. Hang on just a minute." Dad was in the kitchen. I went in there and said, "Sheriff's at the door, Dad. I don't know what he wants." He said, "Oh," he walked in there and called him by first name. "What you want? Come on in, man. Make yourself at home." He said, "I don't have a lot of time to talk, Herman." He said, a highway patrolman's been shot right down the road here from the house. The guy that shot him's off in the woods. We're trying to find him." Dad's like, "Is he up in here in the woods behind my house?" He said, "I don't think he's made it that far. He's a couple miles down the road." He said, "But I got something I want you to do." Dad's like, "I'm listening." He said, "I want you to load some of them foxhounds you got and bring them down here where the boys in the woods. And when I tell you, I want you to turn them loose." Now, there wasn't no GPS collars. There wasn't no telemetry collars. You turn the dogs loose and the dogs will loose. But like you said, they follow scent. This is our neighborhood. We live here. Dogs are going to come home. Next morning, they're going to be at the house.
Yeah.
Dad even had a pen set where they could go in the gate and it would spring back shut, so they could actually let themselves back in the pen.
Mm-hmm.
So he loaded up about 10 dogs. He had about 30. He loaded up about 10, followed the sheriff down the road. I went with him. Daddy got his rifle too before we left. But I went with him, and sheriff got on the megaphone. He said, "This Sheriff Leo Harper, Lenore County Sheriff." He said, "My canine handler's here, and I got 10 trained killer police dogs out here in this truck. If you don't give up, I'm going to turn them loose in there and they're going to kill you." And that's about how he said it. And he said, "I'm going to count to 10. 1, 2, 10. Cut them dogs loose." And I opened the dog box and they piled out of there. And they went about 20 steps and they struck a fox. There were no deer in this area at that time, but it was full of foxes.
Full of fox.
And they struck a fox, and it sounded like the tops of the trees were shaking. In about 5 minutes, that guy that had shot that trooper was standing in the middle of the road with his hands over his head, talking about, "Please put me in the police car."
Yeah.
Now, the sheriff bluffed him. Them dogs wouldn't have hurt him. They'd have licked all over him if they'd have seen him.
Yeah.
But he didn't know that. And the deputies put the guy in the police car, carried him on down to the jail, and my daddy and the sheriff sat there on the tailgate of the truck and listened to the dogs for about 3 hours. And I hadn't forgot that. It was a school night because I had to go home because I had to go to school the next day. But I was learning so much that night, not being in school. Next morning, all the dogs were home. They all came home. But that's a story from my youth that that I feel like is an important one. Because number one, today I feel like about half the organizations in the world would be trying to argue with us for doing it. We'd probably have protesters for doing it. And I've always tried to take a kid hunting. Take a kid hunting with hounds. I try and take people that get on my page that are strictly against everything. I invite them to come hunting with me. A couple of them actually have their own pack of dogs now, and I think that's pretty funny. They were very adamantly against it. Now they have their own dogs. But I try and take a kid hunting because it seems like the whole world is trying to take it away from them. And when I say hunting, I mean any type of hunting.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to come of society. I don't think I'll live to see it. But I do know this. Eventually, society is going to collapse. There's no way it can keep going like it's going. History taught us that. Rome wasn't captured, Rome fell. Rome fell from within because of the same things we're doing right now. When society collapses, I'm preaching a little bit, I'm sorry. I'm taking your
You're
time.
good. No,
When society collapses, who's going to be better to take care of themselves and possibly save somebody else's life? That guy whose shoes are wore out on the bottom because he walks on concrete all day? Or that boy that knows how to go in the woods and find dinner?
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah. And you came up in the same area. I think I don't know. I don't want to tell you age, and I don't want to tell mine either. But so you were close to old Frank White. You know, when he was down there in Snow Hill and had his Southern Sportsman show, and I used to watch it every Saturday morning when he came on.
Me
and his
too.
zebra striped airplane and
Yeah.
Bronco and his Irish setters and his last sign off was always take a kid hunting and fishing. You know, and that's what I remember too. So, you know, I've done a lot of youth education over the years and with the agency with hunters and shooting sports and hunter safety and those types of things and hunter safety tournament and shooting sports tournaments and that stuff. And you know, when you can see the impact it makes on a lot of children in the school systems. And I mean, we used to go teach hunter safety in the schools, and we take our guns in there, and nobody said a word about it. And you know, we'd shoot skeet behind the schoolhouse to practice for the shooting team and that kind of thing. And you know, times change. There's a lot of things that change, and you have to adapt. You know, with everything. But if you lose sight of where you come from, you don't never know where you're going. So I think that's important, as we got to always remember where we came from.
One of the ag teachers, me growing up, one of the ag teachers in school owned a farm that was right next to the school. Opening day of dove season, after school, we went dove hunting.
Oh yeah.
I have rode the school bus with my single shot 410 shotgun on the bus. The principal told me that I had to give the shotgun shells to the driver when I got on the bus, and I had to lay my shotgun up there next to the driver's seat. That he didn't want me to have it back there on the bus.
Yeah.
But I have rode the bus with 20 shotgun shells and a shotgun. Rode the school bus, state school bus.
Every
I've done
truck
that
in
in
the
my
parking lot
lifetime.
when I was in high school had a gun rack in the back window.
And most of them were unlocked.
Yeah. And we hunted before school and after school just about every day. You know, and it's just a different world now. You know, I understand.
The largest buck killed in Lenore County to this date was killed by a group of teenagers. There's a couple of them that were pictures were in the paper, but there was a whole group involved. I won't call any names, but I have some very intimate knowledge of this. On the way to school one morning, the deer had been seen standing out in this field, and he was a monster. He was a hoss. And this field we passed every day. And we talked on CB radio every morning. Anybody see that deer? No. Well, that morning, the call come on the radio, and I could just picture him in my mind. He was shaking all over. Here's the deer. Here's the deer. Boom! We took the deer to the school. The automotive shop had an A-frame they used to pull motors out of the cars. We pulled that deer up on an A-frame and cleaned that deer. That was ag class that day.
Yeah.
We carried the deer meat over to the home ec building, and they cooked it, and we had deer for lunch.
Yeah.
People from the newspaper came out, took pictures of the deer, and to this date, that's the biggest deer that's been killed in Lenore County.
Wow.
It was killed by a bunch of teenagers poaching.
Imagine that.
Land wasn't posted though, so technically it wasn't poaching. But I'm just saying that's what it was. That's one more thing. People get so bent out of shape. I wrote an article a couple of months ago about posted land and what is trespassing. You got to give due notice. The Landowner Protection Act spells it out. This is exactly what you have to do. Post your land. I thought some people were going to skin me alive. They said he's trying to tell you how to get around the law. No, I'm trying to tell you how to follow the law. This is the law.
Yeah.
Well, it's my land. You ain't supposed to be on it. Give notice. Give notice. Post it. What's your take on it, Major? What's the law say? Am I right or wrong?
You're right. But there are places in the state that have stricter regulations when it comes to written permission and different types of hunting. That kind of. I don't know much about Snow Hill. I would say down there it's probably got to be posted. I don't think there's any written permission laws down there other than purple paint and Landowner Protection Act. I would imagine. That's funny. I'll tell you a real quick story if you got a minute.
Yeah, I do.
Chairman of county commission called me one time. He said, you got to come up here to Carthage. He said, we got a problem. I said, all right. And so went up there, and he was a friend of mine. He was a big landowner up north end of the county. And he said, come on in. He said, county manager's going to come in. We're going to have a meeting. I said, all right. They come in. I said, what's the problem? He said, man, we got to do something about this trespassing and dog hunters up here in north end of the county. And I said, okay, what's the problem? He said, I run it all over, and same old thing you hear. And he said, a state's got to do something about it. And I said, well, be honest with you, I said, there's a general statute that doesn't give the state authority to regulate dog hunting east of I-85. I said, so that's your problem. I said, that's a county law. He said, what? He said, what? I said, yes, sir, that's a county law. I said, that law's in the books for each county to be able to have to regulate and that kind of thing. So we sat there and had a long conversation about it. And, I told him the story about, I said, go down the street and ask that legislator how it worked out for him last time he threatened to do away with dog hunting in Moore County. And you come back and talk to me, we'll have a conversation. But yeah, that was good. That was a funny story from back in those days. And, we still have the same laws on the books here that we've had for, I don't know, 30, 40 years now. And it's some places it's people have self-regulated and land has gone away and been developed, and you don't have certain types of hunting in certain situations anymore. But Eastern North Carolina is a different animal. I mean, you go to Hyde County and that's it. There's nothing else to do. It's the land of bear hunting and deer hunting and duck hunting and everything else, and as opposed to going up to Asheville and being in Buncombe County and urban areas and that kind of thing, or Wake County or whatever. So there's places that things are compatible and things aren't compatible. And
you mentioned Wake County. Last time I looked at the map, there's a slither of Wake County that you can run dogs on for deer. I didn't know that. I figured for sure that Wake County was off limits, but I got looking at the map, and sure enough, there's a little sliver up there that's good to go.
Yeah, dog line I think runs right through it.
I'd have never thought it in a million years. But well, look, I'm not gonna hold you up the rest of the day. I took up half your day anyway.
No, you're good.
I appreciate you talking with me. I feel like we've had a good talk. Go
yes,
ahead
sir.
And tell them who you are again. Tell them what you want to do. And tell them why they should vote for you.
Yes, sir. Mark Dutton, candidate, North Carolina House District 78. Vote for me if you want a local voice. I mean, if you want somebody that's going to represent the local community, support the things that are important to the local constituents, and not just go and listen to special interests and big money and groups in Raleigh and try to dictate what happens from afar. I'm gonna be somebody that listens to you. So that's all. That's the spill I got. Just a good old local boy from Moore County, just wanting to continue to serve and make a difference in my community, and that's why I'm running.
That sounds great. I'm gonna stop the recording right now.
Yes, sir.